Hello everyone! In this video, I'd like to talk more about escalating tensions between US and China on technology, and also share the recent news this week where US government decided to bring more chip factories back to America while putting new sanctions on Chinese company Huawei. So, what was the recent news? As shown in the article below by Wall Street Journal, Trump administration, Pentagon, and American chip makers have now realized through the coronavirus pandemic that their supply chain for chip manufacturing is too dependent, or it relies too much on Asian factories. So now US is trying to be self-sufficient on semiconductor chip manufacturing. So why does it matter to be self-sufficient on semiconductor chip manufacturing? And why is this semiconductor chip important? Because semiconductor chip technology is key in all the innovation fronts, including communications, especially 5G networks these days, smartphones, computers and tablets, and all the consumer electronics, cars. All the self-driving cars are basically depending on the sensors and the semiconductors that does all the calculations and machine learning, and also factories. For automated robots, it needs smart chips inside. And what's important to Pentagon is especially the chips being used in military and defense applications such as drones, military radars, satellite systems, and all the communication systems and so on. So in that sense, it's very important to make sure that you have the control over semiconductor chip supply chain. So let's look at where are all the chips are being manufactured as of now. So as shown in the map here, which lists out all the different kinds of chip manufacturing facilities by region, the major takeaway from this map is that most of the chip manufacturing facilities are actually concentrated in Asian region. Either it's in Taiwan, Japan, Korea, China, or Singapore. I mean, there are, of course, some manufacturing facilities in the United States and Europe, but you wouldn't call it majority based on this map. And if we look at the ranks of top 15 semiconductor firms in 2019, of course, Intel is number 1, Micron is number 5, Broadcom, Qualcomm, TI. I mean, most of the top 10 are occupied by US companies. But one thing to note is that a lot of these US companies, Intel, Micron, have their factories in Singapore or China. And also a lot of the companies that only focus on the design, such as Qualcomm, TI, NVIDIA, they outsource their manufacturing or chip making process to Asian partners, such as Samsung or TSMC. So essentially, a lot of the actual physical chip fabrication is happening outside the United States. So as a follow-up to US government's effort to bring back all the chip manufacturing capability back to the United States, the leading chip making firms such as TSMC, Samsung, Intel, Intel of course has a lot of facilities in the US, but even the foreign firms like TSMC in Taiwan and also Samsung in South Korea are trying to expand the manufacturing facility in the United States. And recently, TSMC actually announced this week that they will build the chip manufacturing facility in the United States, and they will invest $15 to $16 billion in Arizona. And also Samsung already has their manufacturing facility in Austin, Texas, but there are articles saying that they have the plan to expand that facility significantly. And in addition to the news about bringing back chip manufacturing back to American soil, US has now set up a new sanction on Huawei, a Chinese telecom equipment company, just today, May 15th. And with this new rule, any company who uses the US technology to make certain semiconductor products, if they want to sell any of that products to Huawei, they need to get the license from US government. What does this mean? So to better understand this new sanctions impact on Huawei and possibly other Chinese companies that get the chips with US technology, we need to understand how the chips are made and how the supply chain works. So in order to make this integrated circuits or chips, it's largely divided into designing, manufacturing, and packaging and assembly. And let's look one by one to see how this sanction could have an impact. So let's look at the design phase first, out of whole manufacturing supply chain. So let's assume the case where Huawei or its subsidiary semiconductor company, HiSilicon, wants to design a new chip. Nowadays, most of the chip designs are done through the Electronic Design Automation or EDA software. And most of these EDA software are made by American firms such as Synopsys. So if Huawei wants to use Synopsys' software, or if Synopsys wants to sell their software to Huawei, then it basically needs to get this license from US government, which would be definitely challenging. So let's look at the manufacturing phase. Suppose the situation where, okay, Huawei cannot design its own chips, so maybe can it buy the chips from other companies? So here in the diagram I have shown 4 leading chip making companies such as Intel, Samsung, Micron, and TSMC. Intel and Micron are American companies, so it's very straightforward. If you want to sell any chips based on US technologies, they will need to get the license to sell the products to Huawei. But what about Samsung, which is South Korean company, and TSMC, which is Taiwanese company? Even though they are not American company, they still use US technologies to manufacture the chips because they buy or they use the semiconductor chip manufacturing equipment from Lam Research and Applied Materials, which are American company. So whenever it buys etch tool from Lam Research and deposition tool from Applied Materials to manufacture the chips, those chips cannot be sold to Huawei unless there is a license from US government. Then what about the case where Chinese chip manufacturers like SMIC or YMTC want to manufacture their own chips for Huawei? But there's also a problem here because if they want to manufacture chips, they basically need the equipment from American companies such as Lam Research and Applied Materials or KLA Tencor. Without those equipments, essentially they cannot manufacture any chips. So in summary, as shown in this diagram, there are multiple phases and multiple fronts where US sanctions on Huawei could have impact on China's capability to produce or at least get its own chips that are required for many different kinds of technology. So this sanction will be definitely crucial for Huawei and all the other potential Chinese companies because this sanction could expand to other Chinese firms. And as a response, China, of course, says that it will retaliate in some fashion to American companies that are selling products in China. And one potential candidate could be Apple because Apple is not only producing most of its products in China, but also it's a very important revenue source. I mean, the last quarter, 16% of its total revenue came from Chinese market. And again, what's obvious here is that decoupling between US and China in terms of technology, semiconductor global supply chain, this decoupling will continue in the future, and it's definitely interesting to see how this pans out. Thank you for watching the video today, and I will definitely come back with more interesting tech news. Thank you again, and have a great day.